Former Vice President Joe Biden escaped further criticism in South Carolina this weekend after comments he made last week about working with segregationists in the Senate.
The Democratic frontrunner was one of the many presidential candidates at Congressman Jim Clyburn's world-famous fish fry on Friday. CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns was in South Carolina this weekend as well. So, there was a lot of conversation about whether or not Biden would have to address these comments and just how he was going to be received because he hasn't really put himself out there all that much. Right. So how was he received?
Well, it's really interesting. South Carolina, I think, gave us a reality check about what voters are actually feeling and hearing on the ground versus what kind of the national conversation is. And a lot of voters that we talked to around the state over the past several days, they knew about Biden's comments, but they weren't really concerned about them. Or if they were uncomfortable, made uncomfortable by the comments, they were able to look past it or wanting to look past it for this kind of greater goal. Every voter that we talked to said their number one goal was defeating Donald Trump. And so this kind of, I think, is informative because all of these candidates are figuring out whether and how to spar with each other, whether and how to take on Biden himself to gain an advantage. And I think they're finding, as far as voters are concerned, that they really want the party to stay unified. They feel that after 2016, they need to kind of be united in their goal. So that's what we're seeing in South Carolina, and I think that's going to inform how these candidates approach the debate in Miami later this week.
Yeah, I think I saw you tweeted something along those lines where you said that it seems, based on your reporting, that voters, Democrats, are not so concerned about intra-party fighting. They just want to get on message, and that message is defeating Donald Trump.
Exactly. And even voters that were supporting other candidates, I talked to a lot of Kamala Harris supporters who really didn't want to pile on Biden. They really still had this kind of deep love for Biden, but they were just choosing another candidate. And they didn't want the party to be engaged in this fight because they know they're eventually going to have to rally around whoever the nominee is.
So can I just, this question and the comments that Joe Biden has made, a lot of people have suggested to me, voters, that this is going to be something that they're going to have to deal with often, that he is prone to making gaffes. But the other question I have is, look, when you see somebody like Cory Booker, who hasn't really gotten a lot of national attention over the last couple of weeks, but all of a sudden he's on television every single day now because of this moment. Are these sometimes manufactured? I get that there are younger Democrats who think that Biden is problematic. He represents a different generation. But can some of this stuff sometimes seem as if it's manufactured?
Well, you gotta. It must have been an irresistible thing for Cory Booker, right? I mean, you're running a legitimate campaign. Here's an opportunity to get the spotlight. Do you just pass on it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up Cory Booker because I think he is a really interesting test case for all of this. So remember, earlier in the week, he was on every primetime cable show talking about Biden. Remember, he's only polling about 2% in national polls and in South Carolina, where he has invested a lot of time and effort. Take someone like Elizabeth Warren, who has been on the rise. She was very reluctant to criticize Biden by name, asked repeatedly about it, really didn't want to engage. So by the end of the weekend, Cory Booker was not talking about Biden. Our own South Carolina embed Lecrae Mitchell caught up with him at the state convention on Saturday, asked about Biden, and he said, look, I'm here to talk about the people. I'm here to talk about our greater goal. Wasn't trying to engage with Biden by the end of the night. And every voter that we talked to said, look, we just want the party to stay on message, stay focused. And the candidates picked that up. At Clyburn's Fish Fry, they literally all wore the same T-shirt, a blue T-shirt that said Clyburn on it. And
except for Bernie, right?
He ended up, even Bernie, by the end of the night, put on the T-shirt,
really?
which I think that shows a lot about where the party is on this unity thing, right? So by the end, they took a big group photo, and that was an explicit message to the voters. And you heard that in all the speeches throughout the weekend. Look, whoever the nominee is, we got to rally behind them. The big question is, can they sustain that, this kind of kumbaya moment that they're having? We're getting into the debate. A lot of these candidates are going to have to try to differentiate themselves. So how do they do it?
So speaking of issues, what were sort of the big issues discussed or brought up?
Well, the economy is still top of mind for people. And, I've been really interested in how Democrats are going to navigate a good economy, right? Because you don't want to be cheering or appear to be cheering for the economy to turn. But a lot of voters I talked to said, look, the economy is getting better. They'll acknowledge it. but not for everybody. And especially in a state like South Carolina, we were focused on Columbia and some of these city centers, but it's actually a really rural state when you get really down into it. And so a lot of people talked about, look, I don't have access to healthcare, I don't have access to broadband internet, I don't have access to kind of some basic fundamental resources, which also speaks to the broader theme that we pulled away, which is that voters are not in the day-to-day controversies. They're really concerned about their own bottom lines here. So the economy top of mind, healthcare, education, huge. Access to education, how to pay for education, and that's something obviously Bernie Sanders is talking about today.
That's right. He's got this plan to deal with the student debt crisis. What are you hearing?
Well, this is a big plan, something that's kind of unprecedented. Bernie Sanders has been talking about offering free college for a long time, but this is trying to eliminate all student debt, trillions of dollars of student debt. Now, that's a huge, ambitious plan. He's trying to pay for it by this new tax on Wall Street, various taxes on Wall Street. He's going to get criticized about how to pay for it, but he's trying to kind of get ahead on policy. Remember, he was kind of the purveyor of all the Democratic ideas that have now become mainstream in the party. Elizabeth Warren has kind of taken on the mantle as the policy chief. We're getting into the debates here later this week, and I think this is Bernie Sanders' way to say, look, I'm staking out this position in the field, and we'll see if others follow suit, or if others say, look, that's too expensive, we need to focus on other items. But it does speak to this broader issue we've been hearing about education, the economy, how to pay for these things.
Did you find that any other candidates sort of reached out to sort of stake out a spot of their own? I mean, that's, I think, a really good move on his part, right? We're all talking about this thing. None of the other candidates, I think, are floating an idea like this. Did anybody else have any ideas that are that unique?
Well, you're seeing other candidates really try to focus on policy. There aren't really that many differences, though, among all of these candidates. So a lot of it is going to be in presentation, a lot of it's going to be in behavior and kind of rhetoric. But I think that they're starting to realize that, look, voters want to know how you're going to get things done, and that's what they're speaking to here. So I would look for, whether other candidates bring this up in the debate, whether they agree with where Bernie Sanders is, or whether they come up with other items on their own.
Fascinating.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Caitlin, always great to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.